Welcome to Power Talks. Since millennia, the world has gone through wars and conflicts. People have been displaced, disappeared, and their human rights violated. In recent times, common people and people in power have begun to talk about peace and justice. Talking about LTTE, the conflict and war between the government and the LTTE has claimed over 60,000 lives and displaced even much more.
Exactly.
Much more people. We hear about the news of their attacks, of them attacking the government every other day in the newspaper. How do you see the future of your country in terms of achieving peace and harmony? And if it does, how will this happen?
Yeah, now if you look back, this terrorist problem had been there for last nearly 3 decades.
3 decades.
What the LTT is asking is a separate state within a tiny island, which nobody in the world will agree. So I believe that now the government, under the leadership of His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa, he has given a very clear signal to the terrorist groups that if you don't surrender, you will be wiped out. So it will happen. So they are confined to a very small area, keeping the nearly 40 to 50,000 civilians as a human shield. I mean, if they try to get out, they'll shoot them. They have killed several thousand of civilians like that. So that is the problem that the government is facing, how to get these civilians out of their hands. So that is why it is taking fairly long time. Otherwise, it would have been few days.
European Commission or the European Union gives out the message of peace and brotherhood, especially after the world broke into pieces after World War I and II. How can Asia, especially the South Asia and Middle East, learn from Europe?
What people in Asia know about Europe is something very personalized. The people of Europe have come out of the war. Instead of starting rebuilding their armies and their next confrontation, they went for a totally different system of governance. They decided to pull together the resources and the power sharing that we have known today as European Union, and through that they managed to replace the conflict with cooperation. And clearly this is what has led the European citizens to the prosperity they have today.
Very often we watch the news as North Korea posing a strong threat in nuclear weapons, which is a concern to the entire world. Just being the immediate neighbor, I'm sure South Korea is always at a high alert. How much does it affect the peace and growth of your people's mindset?
The nuclear threats posed by North Korea undermined peace in Asia and the world as a whole. North Korea's state's satellite launch is seen as one of its tactics to gain leverage by pulling the U.S. To the negotiation table. Experts say that it is also a means to stabilize the power structure in a post-Kim Jong-il regime. If tensions rise between North and South Korea, people in the South will feel nervous, which will lead to a reduced foreign investment, and this will have a negative impact on the economy. Therefore, the government should turn the situation around and try in earnest to have North Korea come forward for dialogue. I believe this will help a great deal toward economic discovery. For the last 10 years, the peace on the Korean Peninsula means the North threats do not negatively affect South Korea as much as they once did.
Besides military operations, is there any alternative way to fix it?
I don't think there's an alternative way. First, we should continue to pursue dialogue and cooperation between North and South Korea. There should also be bilateral talks between North Korea and the U.S. We should also continue to engage with the North through the six-party talks. Dialogue and cooperation are the only means we have to address a variety of problems, including North Korea's nuclear issues, normalization of North Korea-U.S. ties, economic aid to the North, and building peace between two Koreas.
The coverage and conflict of Nepal over the last 1 decade has clearly affected the tourism of Nepal. And there's clearly a demand of a lot of negative news around the world, not just Nepal, but anywhere in the world. But in your case, you have also done a lot of human interest stories from Nepal, which has in a way helped us, and we're grateful to you for that. Where do we find that balance about a country which is in war?
I think it's important to show both sides. I really don't think that one should be deflected from journalism by the fact that it might affect tourism in a country, because journalists do have to try and tell the stories. And it's an interesting question, because the very first television feature I did from Nepal was about where does the conflict meet the tourism. The extraordinary beauty of that season made the story all the more traumatic. I think it's a moot point as to how much it's affected tourism, because I know that some trekkers were rather swept away by the, I think, mistakenly romanticized view of the Maoists. Obviously war brings down tourism, but I think more of a problem for tourists is the sheer inconvenience that you get so much with these perpetual shutdowns, often for extremely obscure and opaque reasons that hamper people's ability to travel, and of course hamper local people far worse than they do tourists.
Despite of the world condemnation, North Korea launched its long-distance ranged rocket. As a member of the Security Council of the UN, what is France's take on this possible future threat?
First of all, we approve completely the Security Council statement condemning North Korea rocket launch. Of course, it's only a statement. It's certainly a statement. And we will prefer a resolution. You know, a resolution has more effect, and of course it's more difficult for the country to escape to this kind of decision. But we are also happy to note that this statement was very quick, and was a quick and unanimous reaction to this provocation of North Korea, because it's a provocation. It's a provocation. I just ask you something. Who could believe that a country where almost 50% of the population is starving need to launch a satellite? And which kind of satellite is it? I think, in fact, North Korea didn't launch a satellite or a rocket. This country rather launched a submarine, because after a few minutes, this rocket was sinking in the Pacific waters. It was a completely failure. But it was a failure from a technical point of view, but it was a provocation from a political point of view. So everybody was laughing. But non-laughing is the decision of Pyongyang to resume its nuclear program and to withdraw from the six-party talks. This is a very serious concern, and it's a serious step back for the peace process in Korea. And it's why we urge North Korea to reconsider its decision and to resume the six-party talks. This is very important.
We have seen around the world that whenever the government has tried to deal with the rebel groups, it's often the people, especially the children and women, who are victimized from both sides. How can this loss of innocent lives be justified?
Well, it can't be justified. There's no excuse, but it is a historic reality that is the case throughout history for women and children, and especially now. It used to be that the majority of people killed in conflict were men who were in combatants. Now it is the civilian population who are the ones caught in the middle. The thing that there is some bit of hope for is that there's a recognition internationally, both by the United Nations and by various countries, that women need to be engaged in the peace process. One reason we can't get beyond a certain point in peace processes is because the victims are not represented, and they need to be there. It can't be left to the people who carry the guns. We have to find some way to make that happen. And fortunately, in a few countries, we have an example where women have played a difference. They tried in Sri Lanka, but the government made this choice and sort of left out the women who are working towards peace in the north.
CM Partners has actively contributed to solving a lot of conflicts. What is the unique approach that you take in doing that?
Well, Conflict Management Partners takes the view that it's not only institutions that have to be transformed to help manage conflict and post-war situations, but it's the individuals that make up those institutions that have to have some changes in the way they're approaching the problem. So I'd say what differentiates CMP from other organizations is that we're focused more on changing the perceptions and the methodologies of individuals who are trying to address these problems. And what I mean by that is there are many very good institutions around the world. What CM Partners is focused on is the individuals who comprise those institutions. And we work to equip them with best practice tools and ideas and methodologies for better working out their problems as individuals. And what we find hopeful is that when you get enough mass of individuals who possess a similar set of skill sets and an understanding that collaboration and interest-based approaches to problem solving rather than positional standoffs on problems tend to yield better results, you start to gain momentum even within those institutions. So we're sort of working at the more micro level might be the difference.
We've talked about conflict, we've talked about war and hopelessness around the world. I mean, is there hope? Is there hope that we will have a world with peace, harmony, and brotherhood?
There certainly is, Santosh, and I'm not a naive optimist to say that. I think there's good evidence around the world that as hard as it is to manage conflict and put violent conflict away, and you can take the transition to majority rule in South Africa as an example of what was previously unimaginable occurred in a peaceful transition. So we do see instances of hope, and I think Nepal itself has demonstrated with the People's Movement that change can occur peacefully, and now you've just faced some more challenges in making that peace sustainable and durable.
Can you explain in simple words, why does a society need human rights?
Human rights are inherent in every human being from the moment they are born until they die. In order to fulfill these human rights, governments have certain duties that they have agreed to at the international level and at the local level. Human rights goes way back in history with the formation in 1945 of the United Nations. And the Charter of the United Nations includes respect for the human rights and dignity of every individual. 3 years later, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was proclaimed by all the member states of the United Nations.
You've also worked in the same office in Sierra Leone and East Timor, where the human rights violations have been on a very high scale. How was your experience working there?
Well, each country is quite different, and as I've said, I've tended to work in countries which have suffered from armed conflict and are recovering from that. My observation is that armed conflict damages societies beyond what you can see. It traumatizes individuals, and it very badly damages not only economies but the whole fabric of a society. So one of the things I noticed is that unless human rights is put at the heart of the recovery from a period of conflict, it's very likely that the conflict will break out again.
During the decade-long conflict and the 3 years of post-conflict in Nepal, we have seen a rise in the human rights violations. In comparison to the countries you have worked in the past, where do you see the status of human rights violations of Nepal?
Nepal, I think, is different from those other countries where I had the privilege to serve, because the conflict, I think, is more internal. I mentioned East Timor having been colonized, Sierra Leone having been affected by another country. Afghanistan too, it's well known, has been affected by outside forces. I think a difference in Nepal is that by and large, the conflict has been very much internal, and by and towards resolving the conflict, the peace process has also been locally driven and locally owned. I think the intervention of the international community, including the United Nations in Nepal, has been relatively light compared to those other countries, and that's a good thing. That it's very important and very, very positive that in Nepal the progress that's been made has been made generally through consensus, through dialogue and discussion and agreement, and with support and assistance from the international community, but without too much involvement of the international community.
During the decade-long conflict in Nepal, thousands were disappeared by both sides at conflict. How is the bill of disappearance progressing?
Well, the ordinance on disappearance has expired, and the government informs us that it is introducing a new bill which will do two things. It will criminalize disappearances, and it will also establish a commission to investigate the disappearances that took place by both sides during the conflict. We have been providing our views at the government's request to ensure that this legislation meets international standards and therefore is effective in achieving its objectives. And it's important for the victims that they achieve their right to know, that is the truth, and secondly, that there is accountability for those responsible.
And the government has extended the mandate of OSCHR for 1 more year. In what ways will you put efforts to ensure that the essentials of human rights are included?
Our office has been assisting different committees, but especially the Committee on Fundamental Rights of the CA at their request by facilitating workshops and providing information and providing exposure to different experts. So the responsibility to draft a constitution which includes very strong human rights provisions is that of the CA, but we have been assisting, and we are ready to assist throughout the process.
How optimistic do you feel that someday we'll have a world free of nuclear weapons?
In the short term, very pessimistic, but in the long term, I think it's inevitable. These weapons are really not military weapons. They can't be used except in apocalyptic circumstances. And Oppenheimer himself had a simple and easy plan for eliminating them and controlling the technology. In 1947, he proposed that you create an international atomic authority that would have the right to own all aspects of the atomic technology. From the uranium mines, they would own the mines. They would have sovereign control over the uranium mines. They would have control over any energy plants, atomic energy plants that generated electricity. And inspectors would be allowed to go and inspect any laboratory or factory or facility anywhere in the world to determine if someone was trying to make enriched uranium. And then you'd simply say that these elements are banned, they're illegal, you can't have weapons, and you have scientists and authorities from around the world monitor these activities.
Since childhood, you have spent most of your life in Asia and in the Middle East, where conflict is real, where the burden of past is a real one. There's a lot of anger, and the sense of revenge is extremely real. Do you think that the philosophy of forgive and forget could be one solution to this?
Well, actually, no. I don't like the phrase forgive and forget. Forgive, perhaps, but you can only forgive if you understand. And so you can't forget what happened. You have to confront the hard truths, the ugly truths, the difficulties of our world, and the difficulties, the hard, ugly truths of our history. So once you do that, though, I would hope that people would understand that, violence is not the way, that life is too short for that, and that we should learn to, while not forgetting the wars and the killings and the murders, we need to move on and try to find a world in which we can live together, particularly in an age of atomic weapons.
Nepal had great prospects with tourism rising in 1990s, but unfortunately we had a royal massacre in 2001, and then we had the royal takeover in 2005, and then we had a decade-long civil war. So mostly related to monarchy, which fortunately we made in 2006. But when we look at Malaysia, there are 9 sultans just in one country. How is it possible that nine sultans can live together and still have a constitutional monarchy?
When we became independent, we decided to be a constitutional monarch and parliamentary democracy. So we had a constitution. For your information, we had only one constitution in Malaysia, which was written before independence in 1957. Of course, we have made a lot of modification to that one constitution, amendments, to keeping up with the changing world. And in the constitution is very clearly stated what are the power, privileges, and authority of the royalties, and they have very strictly confined to that requirements as mentioned in the constitution. So we don't have any problems, In fact, the royalties in Malaysia are very much respected and revered, So we are very fortunate, to have a constitutional monarchy as well as a parliamentary democracy, and that is very successful too,
Thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week at the same time with another special episode. Till then, good luck and goodbye.